All right. So here's the four heirs: Bella, Nevaeh, Roscoe, and Pablo must fairly divide an estate consisting of two items, a house and a car, using the method of sealed bids. The bidders in dollars are the bids in dollars. Okay, so here they are. This means that Bella has bid, $222,000 on the house and $31,000 on the car. Nevaeh has bid $230,000 on the house and $33,000 on the car, and so on. So you can see what Roscoe and Pablo also bid. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to actually, instead of doing this fully by the calculator, which you could do by the calculator, I'm going to use an Excel document to do this. And so just to make things a little bit easier, what I did is I kind of turned this the table, I turned it and I made it so the what we see as columns, I made it into rows. So like I put Bella and I put her what she paid, what she bid on the house and car. And then I put Nevaeh, what she bid on the house and car. So I just switched it a little bit. Like I said, I turned what used to be the columns into rows and the rows into columns. And you'll see it in a minute why I did that. Okay. Well, I'm doing this. You can use either numbers or Excel, and what you can do on your computer is just most likely your computer already comes with this program. So you just have to click on the little magnifying glass in the top hand corner, and then it gets you the search, and then you can put in either Excel, or you could, if you're on a Mac, you could put in numbers. And that will help you see I'm on a Mac, so it comes up numbers, and if I double click, it'll open the program for me. Anyways, that's how you get to numbers. Numbers in Excel is great at, like I said, doing numbers. So I just entered all the information in my table down here. Okay, then the first step is to find to find our fair share, which is the first thing they ask us in this question. What is the fair share for Bella? So to do that, you need to add up what the entire state is to Bella. And I'm just going to do that for everyone because to answer some of the questions later on, we just need to do the whole process for everyone. So to do that, you're going to find the total value of the estate to each person. So you're going to add the value that they placed on the house plus the value to the car to get their total value. Now, instead of using a calculator to do that, I'm going to use this Excel program. So you just press the equal sign, and it brings up this formula page for numbers. Anyways, you're just going to type in sum, and then we're going to click on the box that we wish to find of the numbers we wish to find a sum of. And if the numbers are in the same row, what we can do is notice how I can get on the bottom right corner of that box, and I can click and hold, and I can scroll, I can make it highlight all of the numbers that I wish to add. So then I just press enter or the green box. And that gives me, it should have correctly added these two numbers to the value of the house to Bella and the car. So let's just double check to make sure that that's in fact what it did. So let's see, 222,000 plus 31000. Okay, and we do get this same answer that they get. Okay, so now let's even move further to now the cool thing about this is not only did we put in the sum formula, but what you can do is this is the thing that we put the formula in. That's the cell we put the formula in. And I'm just going to put the green mark again, because if I click on anything else, it's going to add to that. So I'm just going to put the green mark to say we're done with that one. But what it can do is see how, like, when I scroll over the bottom middle of that cell, there it becomes like this arrow, up and down arrow. Well, I can click and hold, and it's going to copy that same formula. So now it's going to add those two numbers and get the sum. So let's just make sure that it did that for each of these rows. I'm just going to check the second row for Nevaeh that it did it correctly, and see how when I click on it, each row, it's telling me, it's highlighting the things it added together to get that answer. So it looks like it's working, but let's just double check with Nevaeh. So if I add 23000, oh, 0, there's 4 zeros on her house is 230,000 plus the price of the car, which is 33,000, so 33000. So then that gives me 263,000, which is what the answer is here. So it did that. Okay, great, right? Okay, and then to find the fair share, what you need to do, you need to do is you need to take that person's value of the estate and you need to count the people we are splitting this between. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 people. So we're going to divide, what we need to do is divide each person's total by 4, and that will be their fair share. So Excel is going to be really great at this. So I'm going to put equals, and then I'm going to click on the square that I want to take that number that's in that cell, and I'm going to divide by 4. So then I can use the forward slash to put in the division symbol, and then I put 4 in, and then I press enter, and see it should have correctly took the value that was in this cell and divided it by 4 to get this answer. And I believe that's what it did. So we can double check that with our regular calculator. Where is our calculator? Okay, it disappeared on me. Okay, here it is. Okay, so we could just do that quickly to make sure that it did that correctly, but 253,000 divided by 4. And we do in fact get that 63,250. Okay, so it looks like it did it correctly, right? And you guys guessed it. We're going to do again exactly what we did a few minutes ago. I'm going to hover over the bottom center of that cell. And I'm going to drag down and voila, like it should have taken the number here and divide by 4. So we can even click in and it says the total value for Nevaeh, and then we divide it by 4. So it even tells you what it did there. And you can see it took this number, and we can click on it, and it says total value of Rasco and divide by 4. So we can see exactly what it did here. So I do believe that it did this correctly. All right, so and I could just double check that just to make sure that it did. I'm doing a video for my students really quick. The 6.5. Oh, wait. Oh, I'm just going to double check that it did this correctly for us. So I'm going to check Nevaeh's total. So 263,000, and then divide by 4. And then we do get this 65,750. Okay. All right. There we go. Okay. From here, we need to figure out which items are received by who. So we have an answer to the first question. Sorry. So it asks us in this question, what's the original fair share for Bella? So let me see if I can find the actual question. And the answer here is 63,250. So that is exactly what we calculated, I believe. Where is it? So the fair share for Bella is 63,250. And we checked the answer. Where did the answer go? There it is, 60,250. So we did do that correctly. So yay, woohoo. And I don't want that big. Okay. All right, so we go on to the next part of this problem, which asks what's for the initial allocation. So to figure that out, and I need to find, okay. What we need to do is we need to figure out who receives which items. So we go across and we look at who bid the most for the house, who finds it most valuable. So we have 222,000, 230,000, 225,000, and 232. Of course, we're looking for the number. We start at the very left digit. They all start with a 2, and then we start at the second to last second digit. And then we have 2 numbers that have the larger number is 3. So it could be between Nevaeh and Pablo, but we look at the third number and then we notice that there's a 2. So 232,000 is greater than 230,000. So Pablo, in fact, gets the house. So we're going to put items received, the house. Now we look down the column of the car, or if you're looking at the original table, then you're going to be looking at the row. But anyways, 31,000, 33,000, 34,000, 35,000. So 35,000 is the largest. So Pablo also gets the car. Hey, Rebecca, can you try to be quiet, okay? Okay, and then I'm going to put down what the value of those are. So I'm going to put down, and that is actually his full total value, 270,000. Okay, that's the value. Okay, and then everyone else doesn't get anything. I mean, there was only a house and car to give out, so gets nothing. I'm not even going to put anything in that row, and actually I'm going to use that in a minute to get, well, I guess I can put nothing. And I'm going to use that same thing to just fill in those. So you see how I did that same, the Excel and numbers are really, they're happy to copy whatever is above, down, below. So I just filled in nothing with that for everywhere. Okay, and then for the initial allotment, what we're going to do is so we look at each person individually and we look at Bella and her fair share, she deserves to get 63,250. She received nothing yet so far. So we're going to put the initial allotment, we're going to say she's going to receive from the estate. So I'm going to put that in parentheses, 63250. Okay. So I'm going to say, if you're paying to the estate, we're going to put it. But if you, okay, so the paying to is not in parentheses, okay? So if you see a number that is not in parentheses, that means that person is paying it to the estate. Okay. Okay. So this person, the same thing with Nevaeh. She deserves $65,000 and she gets nothing. So the estate still owes her $65,000. So 65750. Okay, in parentheses, and I'm going to put in parentheses, like I said, when the estate owes them. Okay, then 64750. Okay, and then now Pablo gets more interesting. Because he actually did receive $267,000 from the estate. I shouldn't actually put in parentheses there because we're using parentheses for something else, maybe just. So we're going to take the value he did receive and we're going to subtract the amount. Well, okay. I always, at this step, I just take the larger number and subtract the smaller number. So I'm actually going to use my calculator to do that. A little bit easier at this point, just to use the calculator. Okay. So I'll take 267 000. And then I'm going to subtract his fair share, 66750. Now, so he was given too much, right? So we subtracted what he should have gotten, and now this is what he owes. Okay, so paying to, I'm going to make it 200 250, I believe that's what it was. That's what he needs to pay to the estate. So see how I didn't put that one in parentheses. So all the rest are a debt, if you will, the estate has. They need to pay that amount. And this one is an outstanding balance that Pablo needs to pay. Okay. All right. So at this point, we can use, so Pablo, let's just say Pablo did already pay the estate. He didn't yet, but we're just like imagine that he did. If he gives the estate 250, and then what we would have to do is we would have to take away, so like we need to use this, the money that Pablo gave to the estate and use it to pay off the rest of the people because he owes them because he got the house and they didn't get anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add all three of those numbers separately. So I'm going to come over here because I'm going to put the sum over equals the sum. But I'm going to click up here and pull down all those numbers. So, and then I'm going to press equal. So now it's giving me the sum of those three numbers in that cell. So then I'm going to subtract those numbers. I mean, I could even make it do this. I could do this number. I'm going to go Control C, and then I'm just going to make it do this number minus this number equals 6,500. Okay. So notice what I did. I added together all of the values that were in parentheses. That is what people were receiving from the estate, and I subtracted it from the amount of money that the estate was getting was paid to the estate. Okay, and we got this 6,500. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take 6,500. So I can just use this is a calculator, 6500, and then I'm going to divide, use the / divide by 4, enter. And that gets me, so just so you guys know what I was doing, first of all, I added all those numbers that were in parentheses together, right? The 63250 plus the 65750 plus the 64750. I added those all together and I got this 193,750. Okay. Then I took that number and did the amount that Pablo was paying to the estate minus what the estate had to pay to everybody else. And that gave me this 6,500. And that is the surplus. Okay. So this is the surplus. Then what we can do is we can take the surplus, because the surplus is just the extra money, and now that the estate happens to have, so we need to split it equally among everybody. So I divide by 4, and oops, actually I can just go delete here. I added in a bunch of numbers that shouldn't be here. Okay, and then I got this 1,625. So what that's telling me is, now I'm going to erase these. You guys can just putting those there to see where the numbers are coming. This is the surplus that everybody is going to get. They're going to receive from the estate. So I'm going to put that in parentheses. So that's 1,625. There, right? 1,625. And like I said, I don't have to I'm just going to pull that down. All right. Now, if both numbers are in parentheses, I'm going to add them together because they're receiving. Okay, so now for this is the final allotment. And it's a little bit tricky, but if we think about Bella, let's review. Bella got nothing, right? So the final allotment for her was nothing, no items, if you will. But then she's going to be paid $63,250 plus $165. And that's 64,875. And let's just double check the answer there. And that's exactly her final allotment that they talk about here. Her initial allotment, just in case you're curious about that, her initial allotment was this 63,250. That was what, and Bella gets no items. Like I said, she gets nothing. And then she receives or gets from the estate that amount. And then the same thing, her final allotment, she gets no items, but she gets from the estate $64,000. So those are all the answers for this. But let me just finish off with everybody else for good measure. Okay, and then same thing, this person's no items. And we just have to take the amount that she's receiving from the estate plus her surplus. So it's 6, 5. This is hard to put all these numbers. A lot of numbers going into the calculator, right? 6, 5, 7, 65, 750 plus 1625 equals, okay, so she's going to receive 67,375. Okay, and then this person's gonna receive, like we said, we're gonna add because you're receiving all that from the estate, so 64,750 plus 1625. So 66, there should no items. But they receive 66. So I'm gonna say they receive 66375. Okay. Right, and sometimes I like to just double check myself when I'm doing this. I find like double checking is really good for me, but okay. And then last but not least, see, he has to pay the estate. He actually hasn't paid them yet, but before the check was actually written, he has to pay the estate this, but the estate is going to end up giving him back that amount. So we actually subtract those. So it's 200,250 minus 16225, enter, and then that's 198. Yeah, okay. So this guy is going to receive the house in the final allotment and car and pay $198,625. There we go. So that is the final allotment for everybody. And this, I didn't make a big deal about it, but this was the initial allotment, and with the items received. So it's after you give back the surplus, then that becomes, and you add it to the totals, then that becomes the final allotment. All right, I hope you found this very valuable. Oh, I like to just double check this. I just make sure that things make sense. So like, okay, Pablo was the highest bidder on both the house and the car. So that's what he received, both items. And we added the items together and we got that. And that was the total value that he received. Everybody else did receive nothing. So we took their fair share, and that's what they were owed by the estate, was their fair share. Pablo, we took the things that he got, subtracted his fair share, and that told us how much he owed because he got way more than his fair share. So that's why we took his fair share or he took what value he got and then subtracted what his fair share was, and we got an amount of how much he got overpaid, which is why he's paying back the estate that $225, which makes sense because he got a lot of stuff, so he should pay back the estate. So that makes sense. And these people got nothing. That's why they're receiving money from the estate. And then with the surplus, everybody got more money. So I don't know how. Okay. So these people that they were receiving money from the state, they just received more money. So that's why we added those two together, which makes sense. So 64,000, okay, and then that was 67 and that was 66. Okay, so that looks good. And then you see he owed this money and then he received a little back, so we should have subtracted those because now he owes less. And so that makes sense. All right, so it looks good. Okay, I hope all of this makes sense and have a great day.